Why do you make games? Like, what actually started things like back in '99?
Super philosophical question. Why people do the things they do, right? I knew that I was going to make video games. Back then, there was no other thing I wanted to do. That was the thing I wanted to do the most in my entire existence.
You start with intuition, then let the game reveal itself. From a production point of view, this sounds very expensive. How do
Yeah.
we actually make this happen proactively in a maybe more efficient way?
Yeah, you can't. I think that's the thing. From the get-go, we know what we're doing. And then you try again and you go like, but we don't know what we're doing. How many times have I have heard developers say like, well, we need to make it right this time or next time, or how do the other ones do it? Well, that's the thing, is that unless you're doing...
When you're founding a new studio, like picking the people at the start, it sounds like that's one of the most important things.
I don't think people realize that when you create, when you have a team, when you have a company, an operation in general, it's all about the people. But it's not about the people individually. It's all about...
Raphael, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting.
Raphael, founder of Arcane, behind Dishonored 1 and 2, amazing games that I grew up watching actually. So during my playing vicariously through YouTubers phase, that was one of the few games where I watched from start to finish. Loved the story. So yeah, I'm very excited for this. I want to start very briefly with how we met, because I thought it was quite funny. Nice in Cyprus, actually, in home turf. So yeah, how did we meet, Raphael?
Yeah, we were at some sort of the after party of the GDCY, right? It was a really cool house, with nice swimming pool and fantastic barbecue and catering. And yeah, we were just talking there randomly and thought, oh, that's it. Sounds like a cool thing to do. Let's do that podcast.
Yeah, and I love your introduction as well. I was like, hey, nice to meet you. I'm Harry. And you said, hi, I'm Raphael. And then it took a good half an hour for me to realize, oh, he made that game and this game. I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, it was a very humble introduction. And then we got to know each other, which was very fun. So yeah, been very eagerly waiting for this. Fantastic. So I'd love to get a quick intro of kind of, you were at Arcane for 18 years, but you've since become a consultant for a bit. And now you founded a new studio, WolfEye. So yeah, I would love to get just a brief recap of what you've been up to.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you pretty much summarized it. I was in the industry since 1993. Started with EA, and then eventually have really had that kind of like mentality of doing my own thing, and I'm very driven about like some specific games and projects that I wanted to do. So Arx Fatalis was the first game that I wanted to make. I had the passion and the dream to make this happen. I wanted that was the most important thing in my entire life at that time, when I was 20 something, 25 or whatever. And so by the time I was 29, I founded Arkane Studios in France. We were only 4 people back then. So me and a bunch of friends, we were crazy enough to start this. And then it became, became the Arcane that everybody knew and loved. Dishonored. I mean, before that, Darkness and Magic, Dishonored, Dishonored 2, Prey. And then I left in 2017. So after the company at that point was about 300 people between the French and the Lyon and the Austin office. So it was half and half. Austin was doing Prey, Lyon was doing Dishonored 2. Even though people are confused because the Harvey Smith, who became the leader of Arcane Austin, was actually Lyon for Dishonored 2. So, but anyway, and then after that I left. So in 2017, after 18 years, for a variety of reasons. There's too many reasons to list, but some were very personal and just a need for change. And seeing the end of that arc, like the arc of Arcane, was really powerful for me. Like I had seen from the inception to selling to first success to growing, etc. All that was really fun and interesting. But then I felt like, okay, I got to do something different now. So I left then I was like around for 2 years, just focusing on music and consulting and doing personal stuff. And eventually the itch took again, and with Julien Roby, who was actually one of my very very first early employee, and he was also at Arcane with me in '99. Frankly, we decided to do it again. So WolfEye was born in 2019. And I'm now the creative director and president of WolfEye Studios. We made our first game. It was a smaller game compared to what we've done before, called Weird West. it was a good way for us to assemble some of the people that would then become where we are now. Where now we have a bit much bigger team, and we're getting ready for at some point this year announcing something that I believe people are gonna be very happy about.
Alrighty, very exciting. So with this conversation, I would love to dig into the journey that was Arcane, just to kind of give a bit of insight and some lessons for everyone listening at home. But yeah, I also want to get into WolfEye and a little bit about your consultant experience. I'm very curious about that. So yeah, I'll just start off just to kind of understand, like, why do you make games? Like, what actually started things like back in '99? Because that's a very different world than it is now. It's probably not as common it is now, to have that as a career. So that's a very long time ago. So what started it all?
Yeah, I think people. It's a super philosophical question. Why people do the things they do, right? I think some of us are lucky to do the thing we do because we chose it and we want it, and that's what makes it tick. And some of us, unfortunately, look at work like more like a means to an end. And I'm considering myself very, very lucky that being a big fan of video games when I was a kid, since I was 10, probably 8 actually. That's when I started. And I'm 53, so when I was 8 back then, there was not many people playing video games. But I was always a huge fan of video games, of role playing games like uh, Dungeons and Dragons, pen and paper stuff, and also music. Yes, I liked I was a kid. I was one of those nerds, one of those very shy, introverted uh, kid. I had kind of a tragic start in life with my mother died when I was very young. So I kind of like some people would go into drugs and heroin or whatever. I instead went into reading comic books and drawing and making stories and video games and writing music. That was my thing. And so eventually I managed to do that of my work. I was lucky to get into it. Frankly, it was just a weird story through Electronic Arts that got me in. But once I was there, I knew that I was going to make video games and not work on any video games. I wanted to make my video games, and this has always been hard. It's a very hard and lonely road because nobody wants you to make your video game. Everybody wants you to work on their video games. If
Mm.
you join a publisher or you know this the system is what it is. It's just very hard to impose your story, your video game, your vision to an entire system, including the gamers.
So then you founded it and did it yourself, from my understanding.
Yeah, again, I think some a lot of it is being naive and being thinking you can do it. It's but when you're in your 20s, that energy, that naivety is so such a blessing. It's the best thing that we can have. And again, people will try to tell you, oh, it's too hard, don't do this, or have a safe life or whatever. I was like, well, I don't know. 28, 29, I was also lucky to have an uncle that was very entrepreneur in
Mm.
his mindset, and he saw in me my passion. And I don't think he realized. I don't think he knew how risky and because it's artistics as well, right? Video games are. It's how do you get something that is. It would be the same as trying to be successful at doing movies, or making music or making or paintings. People would be, yeah, good luck, my son. It doesn't sound like a thing, right? And now the times are different because people become super popular by being YouTube influencers or whatever. So
Mm.
like,
It's the
oof,
most popular career choice, right, for kids when
yeah,
they want to grow up. Like, I want to be a YouTuber,
yeah,
and
exactly. So everything goes now, right? So all bets are off. So I think today would not be as shocking if you wanted to be a video game maker, even though the ticket to access it, there's a lot of money involved. There's making a company, hiring a lot of people, getting the interest of other people, getting the interest of the press and the influencers, and most of all the publishers. So it is hard. I'm not saying it's easy. But back then, there was no other thing I wanted to do. That was the thing I wanted to do the most in my entire existence.
Yeah, riding that 20s energy you mentioned, I feel like I'm in a little bit like that. And hearing you use the example of your uncle, I've kind of just reflected now, like I've been blessed because like my dad and both my grandparents started businesses. And I didn't really internalize that when I kind of, for me, it's like, I can help this person and start my own business and just do X, Y, Z. It makes sense. But then from speaking to people, realize that's not really a common thing. So having that person who'd be like, yeah, go for it. And yeah, that is a blessing. So I love the origin story there. I'm curious. You mentioned my games. I think for people listening who may have not like know the type of games, like from my understanding, it's like first person immersive games. Is there anything more around that? Like, what are your games?
Yeah, I want to make my games, and by this I mean I've always been, and that might sound generic, right? Because I think you can take any game and then say, "Oh yeah, well that sounds like any game." But I've always wanted to explore worlds. That's my thing. I like the simulation aspect of a property of a game. Like I like the idea that I'm losing myself in a world that feels like it's believable, feels like it has a sense of place where I can then do things, and that maybe the other characters don't know I'm here, and I can go around them. I can screw with the systems. I can do this thing is super important to me. It's like finding the secret cellar of your grandfather, and it's like going around the things, and that if you kind of like in the secret area, and like only, and it belongs to, that's your experience, right? And so I've liked that, because I guess in the past I was very much into pen and paper RPG. Sorry. And there is this notion of what you do next. That is the thing that the dungeon master always asks. And so I was never into platform games. I mean, I was into them because they are fun, and I get it. I get where they are, but I wouldn't say it was grabbing me as much as I was grabbed by something like, as a kid, when I was 8. I think my first big RPG was Ultima 2, Ultima 2. And it was a huge franchise back then. I mean, as huge as 100,000 people probably. But it's I think anything that, how when you love a specific music when you're a kid, when you love a specific food, when you love a specific movie, property, anything, game, it stays with you for the rest of your life. There's a moment that is very formative in our younger years, right? So like if you think of like the music you were listening to when you were 15, I bet more or less it has influence now with the music you're going to be listening
100%.
for the
For
rest of
me,
your life.
it's 100%. Like for me, RuneScape is that game because I had that from when I was 8 years old to 18. Also, now I'm thinking about it, the soundtrack of music I will never forget, and it's got that aspect where I can just travel, make my own little stories, and unlike a platformer, I don't think of an individual moment that happened in a platformer and have that burn in my memory. But I have that when it comes to like Skyrim and RuneScape because I'm like, that made me feel something, right? And it stays with you.
Yeah.
And that's like you said, they all have their place. But if I think game and like in all capital letters, I start to think the simulation games, at least for me.
Yeah, and so all throughout history of gaming, there's always been that one or two or three cool games per year, right? And so like based on
Yeah,
when you
true.
were playing, that is like, for me it was Ultima in the World, Fallout,
Mm.
and that's it. After that, I'm of course gonna be
Yeah,
influenced by
waiting for
that.
GTA 6.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why, yeah, I like games. I like games that make me travel, and where I can explore and simulate. Feel like I'm really, I have possibilities, a space of possibilities, and that's why those games like Arx, etc. They provide that.
Alrighty. Let's get into a bit about the game development because I know there's a lot of people who want to make these games. And I was looking through your last podcast and you mentioned something quite interesting. You said making a game is like making a salad with tons of ingredients. And I would love for you to explain that for me, please.
Yes. So if you think about the number of moving pieces that you have when you make a game, and unlike, so if you're making a building, there's also a lot of moving pieces, right? You have the electrician that you need to make sure comes after the plumber, or maybe the opposite. I don't know. I'm not a builder. And then if that day is sick, then you have to, and then you're late now, etc. So they all that. So that's the production side of things. But it's a building, so it's a pretty known quantity. Whereas a video game, you don't really know where you're going. So and so you have all these ingredients, all these things, and you need to give it time. You need to. It's gonna be messy. It's gonna be complicated, and you're gonna have to adjust the recipe as you go, because you don't really know the destination. I mean, you might have a vision, or you might think you know where you're going, and that takes you somewhere, and that's necessary. You can't just go like, well, I don't have any idea. Like you need to go somewhere. You think you're going there, even if then that direction is going to change halfway, and that's fine. But anyway, my point about the salad thing is that, yeah, you gotta taste it. You gotta wait until it really works together. And every time you add an ingredient, you need to make sure it still works with the other ones. And there might be too much of one, too much of the other. And sometimes, in our cases anyway, because of so much simulation is at play, then the recipe kind of reveals itself to you as you go. You go, oh, that thing goes really well with that thing. So let's add more of this, or let's fix it, or let's make sure it works, or whatever.
Interesting. So you mentioned in that same podcast, just to follow up on this point, like you start with intuition, then let the game reveal itself. Now that I'm thinking from a production point of view, this sounds very expensive. Like, how do we actually make this happen proactively in a maybe more efficient way now that you've done it a few times?
Yeah, you can't. I think that's the thing, is that the first time you do it, you go, fuck, man, that was exhausting. And I think we got lucky, and never again this way. Now we're going to, from the get go, we know what we're doing. And then you try again, and you go like, but we don't know what we're doing, And so like now you fail again, even though you succeed at the end, but you feel like still fail, because it's like, that process is horrible. Like we gotta be better at this. How many times have I have heard developers say like, well, we need to make it right this time, or next time, or like, how do the other ones do it? Well, that's the thing, is that unless you're doing a building, like I was talking about, and in our industry, a building would be making a sequel of a game, like the 14th iteration of a game, right? So take big franchise number 14, and then you can operate in a way more
like a production
way. Right?
It feels
like a production
because
schedule.
I feel like
you go, and even then, there's still going to be some elements like the story, which is going to be like, story still might change as we implement it, because we realized it's not as clear as we thought it would be, or people don't respond well, or whatever. Because some of these things you can't test in advance, like are people going to like the overall theme? But you can't really test like if a quest is going to work really well, because it's really based on how you implement it. You can't really pre-test the implementation. There's just no way. You only see in context. So yeah, that's the thing, is that at some point the production has to relax a little bit and integrate the chaos into their own structure, which is terrifying for a lot of producers. And it takes a special breed.
Yeah. So let's say you have a team of producers. They hear you. They understand they need to do it. Like you use the word fail, but it sounds like this is kind of like a part of the process. So maybe it's the wrong definition, the word fail. Like, how do we have that potentially more celebrated, or more of a active thing? So you can, because I feel like Raphael understands this, but how do we make it so everyone understands it and like looks for these moments?
Well, it's a lot of communication with the team. It's a lot of not treating it as a failure, but treating it as a process. The first time we understood this was when we worked with. Did you play Half-Life 2?
Half-Life 2, I haven't. I've watched some videos, but I have the idea.
Okay, so Half-Life 2 was, let's say, there was at some point there was Doom, which was one of the revolution in the industry, and everybody was like, oh my God, how did they do that? And then the Half-Life 2 was another one of those, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know after that which one, because it's like the Beatles, etc. Like there's less and less of them, right? Now we're more into an iterative phase of the development of the industry rather than the revolution side. But anyway, Half-Life 2 had that kind of like revolution kind of aspect to it when it came out, because it was beautiful and very fun at the same time, and nobody could understand how they did that. And when I was working back then on Darkness Abba and Magic, so we were it was a little bit after Half-Life 2, we were working on that game. We're working with actually some people from Valve, because we had their technology, and their art director was helping us a lot. And I was asking Victor Antonov, was the art director, and I was asking him, man, like, how we keep failing at this? Like, how did you guys do it? Like, how do you make it pretty and fun? Because what happens with us is that the level designers do something and it's kind of fun, and then the artists come in, they break everything, but now it's pretty. But then the level designer come back and it's not fun. Everybody yells at each other. It's horrible. Yeah, exactly. And he said, with his usual calm, he said something. Well, you have to integrate this in your schedule. You have to accept it as part of the process, and then you will stop looking at it like you failed, because it's part of it. They do the thing. These other guys come in, they break everything, and they add their layer. And now part of the process is going to be to repair things. So instead of screaming and crying about it, do it. Accept it as integrated in your schedule. And then every iteration is a new version of that. And, it's almost like you merge the new version of your source code, because you got that new version of the technology. Things are going to break, and it's painful. And there's two ways you can look at it. Either you cry and scream, or you allocate the time to make it clean, and everybody is not. It's about setting expectation internally. That to answer your question a little more briefly, it's about setting expectation internally.
No, I love that. And the sound of like when you have a sprint, actually planning for the pain part rather than every time it happens, we're like, we're wasting time. It's like, no, we have budgeted for this. So that can hopefully stop the whole snowball effect where everyone starts panicking.
Yeah.
Awesome. You mentioned before, if you were making like the 14th iteration of a game, then you can kind of be a bit more efficient. Well, you've had one game which was super successful, Dishonored 1, and then made Dishonored 2. But there was a bit of a gap there between. So I wondered, what did you learn from making Dishonored 1 that you brought to Dishonored 2 from a production perspective?
It was a very painful development because we changed engine. So the first one was Unreal 3, and then we went to another one, internal from id Software, that we ourselves modified, and then we redeveloped some tools called Void Engine. And so that alone was incredibly painful. And what we learned, though, if you think about it, when you have the lore of your world already, and when you have the gameplay identity and the visual identity, we had the art direction as well. You already have a lot. So then, what's going to be pain, because you know the destination, you know where you're going, and then the only thing that is going to truly differ between the first Dishonored and the second Dishonored is more going to be the story itself. So not the lore, the story. Even though you can deepen the lore, but you are operating from an existing lore, some characters that now you can develop further, etc. So it's actually a very, very different exercise. I was less involved in Dishonored 2. Harvey Smith was, as much as Dishonored 1 was Harvey Smith and I as co-creative director, Dishonored 2 was most principally Harvey Smith. I was like sometime chiming in, but I was focused on Prey. So it was I don't know all the details of Dishonored 2 as much, but I was following it as as the CEO of the company back then, plus consultant, creative, but not much more than that. I was just testing occasionally.
Fair. So it sounds like how much of the pie is the lore and the world building when it comes to like the development? Because you mentioned that was a huge part. Like, is that more than 50% of like the effort, or how does that look?
Oh, percentages are so hard to define because everything is so interlaced, intertwined.
Mm.
You make a gadget and then it becomes part of the lore somehow. But like initially, it was a gameplay idea or a lore idea created a gadget. Created an idea for gameplay. So it's hard to
Mm.
know what are the percentages of things. But I would say different games have different focus. Uh, and I would say Dishonored was extremely lore focused, because we wanted, when you start a game, you could say, well, it's gonna be, it's gonna happen in LA and in the world of gangsters or whatever, and you have some level of lore because you need to say, here are the names of the gangs. Here is, more or less precisely the history of how they met, etc. So there is some lore, but the lore that you're touching operates in reality in a world that exists. So you can reference. You're not wondering like if you see a McDonald's in the street, it's going to be perfect. It's going to support your lore. So like we're really operating in a lore that exists for the most part. Same with a game at war or something like World War II, whatever. You're probably going to use most of like you have all the access to all the realities of the time, like the the weapons, the language, the different protagonists at play, etc. Whereas with Dishonored, we reinvented practically absolutely everything. I was joking with Harvey that maybe we should not reinvent a device for the fork, for example. Like, if there's a fork on the table, let's just call it a fork, right? We don't need to. But we went really wild on reinventing absolutely everything we could. Like, the type of elixirs to heal, the type of technology to everything was reinvented. So this one was very, very low focused. Prey, a little less, but still pretty much too, but not as much.
Mm.
Now the new game we're working on, just as much as Dishonored, unfortunately, or
Mm.
fortunately, I don't know. Depends for who.
Yeah, yeah. For you, maybe a bit painful, but hopefully for the player, they're gonna love it, right?
Well, yeah, but it's painful, but it's also so cool when you pull it off at the end, and you really feel like that kind of like nice balance between what's familiar, understood, but at the same time different
Mm.
is very hard to achieve because you could go way too early in and nobody understands you,
Yeah.
or you can just go banal and then there's nothing special about it. So it's difficult to find that balance.
Yeah, I feel like what you mentioned before, like those monument games, Half-Life 2, I would say like Fortnite's one of them. It's usually a variation of something before and they've
Hmm.
combined, then they've become something new. So I think, like you said, like trying to make something completely different, be ahead of your time, a bit
Yeah.
painful for the player. And this way we can hopefully get the best of both worlds, something innovative, but actually, possible to create. You at Arcane was president slash CEO and co-creative director. And now at WolfEye, you're also very similar situation. Like you are the creative director and president. And I'm thinking like with Arrowhead as well. When I was a recruiter, we were working with them, and the CEO at the time was also very involved in the creative situation. Now he's stepped down as CEO and he's been the creative director, and then there's a new CEO. But you kind of still have the situation where you're president and also co-creative director, and you've done that for 20 years. So how does that work? Like, what are the different roles, and how do you balance them?
Yeah, so it's a little different this time because at Arcane I was the CEO and creative director until we sold to Bethesda, and then I became the president. But I was still also acting as somehow CEO of Arcane.
Mm.
Whereas in this case with WolfEye, I have a CEO, which is Julien Roby,
Okay.
who was my intern at Arcane. He was 18 when he joined us, but he became so cool, so strong, and good at his job that eventually he's way more organized than I am. And so for this new iteration, having him as the CEO makes much more sense, and me as the president, meaning that yes, I'm very aware of all the the backbones of the company, the direction, where we're going, the the strategy, etc.
The operations, those type of things.
Operation,
right?
etc. But I'm less on the money, for example, than he knows where we are on the bank account. It's actually, I don't even know how to log into our bank system. So he's a little more on the operation, even though he's creative as well, by the way. But he's more on the operations, and I'm more on the face of the company / recruiting of the people. He's more on the make things happen, and I'm more on the on the creative vision side. Yeah. But I'd like to say I'm more on the fun part, but I think the other side is more it's more fun for him.
Yeah, exactly. It's taste buds, right? Like everyone
exactly.
can have the same thing. So I'm guessing you prefer this format where you're in your lane, I guess you can say. Like
I'm grateful for having someone like him that I fully trust 100%, like 100%, and that sometimes we take this for granted. But when you have a business partner where the business partner doesn't have their own agenda, trying to like steer the boat somewhere or whatever, it's really cool. We both go exactly in the same direction. It allows me to relax more into the part that I'm feeling more comfortable with, which is the creativity and the vision for the the culture of the company, etc. That's more what I enjoy to do. So it's cool because with Arcane, I was a little bit trapped into some stuff that for many years I did not want. I did not necessarily want to raise money or do things like that.
But there's driving forces that makes it hard to not do that. That's very interesting. I was going to ask you later on, but we brought it up now. It's like when you're founding a new studio, like picking the people at the start seems to be like one of the most important decisions. And you've kind of told this a little bit, like you knew him since he was 18. He was the intern. So you had that trust. And it sounds like that's one of the most important things when you're picking who's going to be kind of with you at the start of a new studio.
Man, it's funny you talk about that because doing WolfEye is like playing New Game Plus. It's we are in a position where we can this time start the game again, but know exactly what we want. And we got. I mean, 80% of this company is former Arcane people.
Wow.
And the value of having a team, and I don't think people realize that when you create when you have a team, when you have a company, an operation in general, it's all about the people. But it's not about the people individually. It's all about the dynamic that you've created between the people. This element goes extremely well with that one. That without this would not really do its thing, etc. And so the value of having a team that has failed together many times, succeeded together many times, know each other, laughs about the same shit, can scream at each other, but with love, is incredible. We are way more efficient. It takes decades to create those teams, and the people that I'm working with right now, for the most part, I've worked with anywhere between 10 and 20 years together.
Wow. That sounds like the biggest cheat code.
So there's a lot of implicit communication. There's a lot of everybody's on autopilot. They already know what I want before I even say it, because at this point they just want it as much as I do. I don't have to convince them about some of the values of the kind of games we do. That usually we have to tell people, oh, that's the reason why we do this. Like, no, the team is in autopilot. They know exactly what before showing it to me that how I'm going to respond to things. So it's very, very powerful, effective.
I can imagine. I'm just thinking for the people listening who don't have the luxury of having a team where they've worked together for 20 years straight, that seems like we'd be like, yeah, that's very nice to have. But how do I have that implicit communication now? Is there a way to fast track this? From my understanding, this was just through sheer osmosis through 15 years of maybe being in the same office potentially. So I'm curious, like, if you were trying to recreate that vibe, what would you do?
Yeah, I mean, it would be like saying, how do you recreate the vibe of that perfect group of friends? We all have that at some point in our lives, and you're in your 20s. early 30s. I'm not sure exactly how old you are, but
26.
26, right? So there's this moment where you have that group of friends you have where this girl is with that guy, and then there's this thing, right? Like there's an incredible, and it took years, it took like 10 years to make, and you know each other, etc. You can't recreate that. It's just an iterative process where the one who stick to the culture stick, and then the other ones move away, and then some new ones that are just appropriate to come in, and that really cool dynamic. It's the same with companies. I think with you sometimes have that magic, or band, you have that magic where everything is just perfect, and you can't create that, you can't buy that. That's why it's always funny to me, funny in a cynical way, when you have those big groups full of money that come to a city and they say, triple the salary, we're going to open our studios, hire anyone, hire
Oh
the
my
best
God. I
ones.
have stories, Raphael. I have stories from the recruitment perspective, speaking to the people, and exactly what you said. Like, they come in, usually foreign, make the studio, pay triple the salaries there. And it's like, right, recreate what you did at King. Like, okay. And then it doesn't work for 3 years. Oh no, we try again elsewhere, close the studio. It's like,
Yeah,
so
and
much paid.
and thank God, frankly, because
Hmm?
I'm glad it's like this, because at least there's some justice. It means otherwise that money would really buy anything, but it can't. Like,
Mm.
some of it you just can't rely on money to have it. It's the human aspect is important, and sometimes it's just no way to buy it.
Yeah, I think you need that passion. I think founder-led studios, I feel like that has its own special section. Like if it's a founder-led studio and you have that vision, I'm just trying to make it something that we can kind of hopefully touch on advice-wise. Like you mentioned, how do you build a group of friends? And I'm thinking, okay, if you were really trying to, like from the sound of it, you kind of need a core group first. If you wanted to build that core group, and then only then you can hopefully build on it and then get a company, a band, group of friends.
Yeah, it's going to definitely rely on a group of like 4, 5, 6 very very strong personalities, or something that there's some sort of a dynamic that works really well between them. And,
Mm-hmm.
and the interesting thing, and you see this even in you see this in some shows, like some TV shows like Silicon Valley or something. And of course, it's a dramatization. But you see different elements with different strength, and sometimes you go like, but everybody think like this one person is doing everything, or is like the mind, but really it's the other one that
Mm.
is more shy, or like more quirky, that actually without that person, this other person would not be as good as everybody thinks, right? So it's really a team thing. It's a dynamic between a certain amount of people. That's why taken individually, you might have this amazing lead artist or something, that also needs is kind of like this other assistant that they used to work with, that somehow, even though in absolute value on the paper is not as high, somehow was bringing something to that person. My point is, there is something about osmosis between things, between personalities, between people, that go beyond a resume, or that go beyond the character sheet that you
Yeah.
would have on a role playing game.
I'm thinking about this, and you don't have to answer this, but I'm curious. This osmosis, do you think that's possible to do from scratch remotely?
Oh, remotely. Well, I don't know. I don't have that experience so far, I'll have to say. Right now, our company is very remote. We have people from everywhere, but it's people that we've worked with physically before,
Mm.
for the most part. I mean, there are some new elements that we've integrated remotely, that never worked at Arcane before, and that are a good fit. So we'll
Okay.
see. It's possible. I think it's possible. Yeah, it probably is possible. But man, I do miss the time of office space, and going out to lunch together, and because it's in between the meetings that the true meeting happen.
Yep, I noticed that at conferences as well, like the real business, at least for me, always at the parties or the in between the actual meetings.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like for you guys, if you're fully remote at WolfEye, do you have regular meetups like some studios do, even if they're fully remote?
Yeah.
How often do you have them? What does that look like?
We used to have two or three per year. Now we have one per year, simply because we're we're bigger now than we've ever were. We've got 55 people.
Hmm,
So, but typically we'll choose a destination that is fun. Like our next one is going to be Brazil,
nice.
and yeah, we fly everybody, and have we have some meetings in a hotel and swimming pool, and so that's, yeah, it's a good moment to celebrate our partnership and collaboration, and at
Hmm.
the same time work. And we do that, yeah, about once a year at this point.
I'm just curious of the setup here because I've heard of a few different ones. Like some people do where they have like they all work together and then they spend the evenings together and they do this for a whole week. Some of them it's a bit more chill. It's like, hey, we're going to basically have a vacation and there's going to be some webinar seminars and like talks for the week, but it's kind of like not doing your actual work week. And some of them it's like we're just going to all work together for a week, or
Oh
some
yeah.
just.
Well,
So I'm
we've
curious, what's
had
the format?
different versions of that. I think like the ones you're referring to, and the ones I was actually talking about, like we call it the WolfCon. So this one has a very specific format. We go to a either a big Airbnb. I mean, it used to be a big Airbnb, now it's a big hotel, and we have a few conferences where we there's a few presenters that are going to talk about some, for example, the current version of the story or whatever,
Hmm.
to everybody in the room, and that's it. And the rest of the time is fun and like a vacation, frankly. But then we also have the meetings where, at Alpha, for example, we're going to fly some people in Austin because I have an office there. We have office space there, and then 10 or 15 of us are going to work together for nonstop for 2 weeks or something.
Oh, nice. Okay.
To like the good old times.
Yeah,
Make
it's
it
like
happen.
there's.
Fit it in the box. So we do have those bursts sometimes, or sometimes we also have me going to France for a week or two, and trying to work on a specific thing very closely with the level designers, because we are at the stage where we need to reorganize the mission flow, whatever. So we do have all of that. So all in all, we do meet, um, regularly somehow. Some of us
Yeah,
anyway, not everybody, but there's a few people that travel quite a lot.
I like that a lot actually. I'm thinking if I was doing a remote studio, like that 2 week sprint you mentioned, like you can get a lot of osmosis done in 2 weeks
Yeah, you
for
can. Yeah.
sure.
And then
Especially
again, and then
during.
you keep the momentum, because it's a lot of it
Mm,
is synchronizing between people, and then like you go off, and at least you know what you're doing.
yeah, because I've had Jeremy Stein on a previous episode, and everyone he's just founding a new studio. He used to work at it was on Full Guys and then Cybo, but a lot of his founding team is people he's worked with for 10 plus years, and he feels like that is one of the biggest reasons why he can have that kind of remote start. But if I were to do that again, or if I was a studio founder or some reason, then that 2 week sprint, because I want to take advantage of global talent. Like, why wouldn't you? But then
Yeah,
getting that 2 week sprint, it's just, yeah. And also, like you said, I like the office vibe. I want those memories, like everyone just running around like, like at least for me, it seems like a good memory to have.
true.
Lovely. So just closing off now, just curious about WolfEye. You mentioned you have a game coming up. Um, what is the story of WolfEye? Why is it called WolfEye? Like, what is WolfEye?
Well, there's always been some sort of a wolf theme in this. It's my band with wolves.
Yeah,
WolfEye. Yeah, it's just a name. I know there's not necessarily tons of reasons behind it. But the next game, so we are about 55 people at this point. We've teased the internet before with what we're doing. So we're doing it's a first person retro sci-fi RPG. And I do believe that the fans of the games that we've done before while at Arcane are going to be very happy to see when they see the games, you know. But anyway, our next step at this point is to find a publisher. So that's going to be our next business effort. Is going to be focused on finding a publisher. So we are going to the Gamescom with our with our material to show, and hope for the best.
Nice, amazing. And I know a few publishers, so guys, hopefully they're listening. And yeah, Gamescom, we're going to party at Gamescom, I assume. Naturally, we have to.
That's part of the trip.
Yeah, get all the publishers in a room. Like, hey, look at the game. That's the way to do it. Nice. Raphael, word of advice to founders. You've done it twice now, and over 20 plus years. If you're founding a new game, what was one thing you would tell them?
Yeah, I would say the world is different now than it was when I did it. So you have different advantages and different difficulties. One of the advantage is that today you could make a game with 5 to 10 people if you are if you have the not even the money, but if you can spare, like your on your lifestyle, if you can really be lean and maybe still live with your parents. I mean, say you're anywhere between 15 years old and 22, 23 or whatever. If you manage to gather people that are just as motivated as you are, which is rare because a lot of people will say they want to do things, but eventually they when it comes to time to actually doing it, they are feeling more like distracted or lazy or whatever. It takes an incredible amount of drive. This needs to be the thing you want the most in life at the moment, where you are in life. It's got to be, you got to have, you need to want to see this come out, right? This game that you have in mind to have a chance to succeed at it, because otherwise it's so hard. It takes a long time. There's no instant gratification for it. It takes 2, 3, 4, 5 years of very, very hard work, a lot of doubt. It's a very lonely road. But assuming you have that in you and you find other people that have that too, then the benefit is that you could use Unreal 5, download the SDK and learn everything you need to learn. Assuming you're fairly technical or artist or whatever, you have that little team. There are all the tutorials online on YouTube, etc. You can absolutely do everything. The biggest problem after that is going to be discoverability, which is not something we used to have before. In the 90s and the 2000s, there were so many gatekeepers from the publishers to the people who give money to the press that being discovered was hard. But once you were, then you had all eyes on you, right? Now. So back then, what was hard was to convince people that you could make a game. Now it's hard. It's not that. It's to reach to the public. So I don't know, TikTok. I don't know how you do that today. No, I think more seriously, you do an early access, and you slowly build your community and you slowly build interest for your game. At first, you are where you are in life. You're not famous. You can't hire big people that are famous because they won't come to you. So you have to do with what you have, and that's the rule of the game since this game exists. The game of doing business, it's always been the same. It's hard at the very beginning. You gotta go through a lot of hoops, and be consistent, a hard worker, honest, and then it's not a matter of luck, because if you constantly hit, you're honest, you're passionate about what you do, there's a moment where it's not luck anymore. The things are aligned and you go through.
Yeah, it's like a matter of time. I wrote about this, like luck is like fishing. If you cast a bigger and bigger net, then eventually the fish are going to go in. But if your net is tiny, yes, you could get lucky. But the only thing we can control is how big the fishing net is. And if, like you said, check the boxes, you're honest, you actually keep, like you kind of put, bashing your head against the wall is one way to say, but just keep fishing. And then you can complain about the weather, but you can't change the weather. So you just need to keep fishing, keep showing up, and then eventually fish come.
I like that. I like the fishing analogy, actually. That's a good one.
Lovely. Raphael, where should people find you? What do you people, if anyone's listening, what should people check out?
Well, I'm on Twitter and Instagram, even though I don't post like a madman. But I would like to plug my band, Weird Wolves. We I've done some of the musics for Dishonored and Prey and Weird West with the band. So and people like those songs that were in those games. So please, come and check us out. Weird Wolves, this one. Find us on Spotify. Follow us. And add our playlist. There's on my main profile on Weird Wolves. There's a playlist that has all our songs there. Support us if you like us.
Hey. Listen to the music and then.
If you hate it, don't. That's.
If you hate it, send Raphael a personal email. No, I'm kidding. So we have weirdwolves.com. It's literally exactly that. They have all the links to what we just said. And fantastic, Raphael. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a very fun conversation.